Good afternoon, investigators. It's Mike Evans and Casey Pine. How are you, Casey?
I'm very good, thanks, Mike. A little bit tired, but I'm still here.
Why are you tired today, Casey? You've been working too hard?
Oh, no, just childhood injuries. My son had to go and break his arm at basketball last night. Of course, the way to
Ouch.
the hospital, even when you're private on the Gold Coast, is a bit out of control at the moment.
Wow. How is he?
He's okay, a little bit sore and sorry for himself because he doesn't have basketball for a while, but it happens.
He'll bounce back. He's young and fit. They do tend to bounce back quite quickly. Hi, Renee. How are you going? Great to see you. People, you are with Casey Pine and Mike Evans on SpyCurious, the Friday afternoon show for investigators who like to take statements and write reports. We're really, really fun people, and we have an introduction before we start. Here we go. As always, we have an action-packed show today with Casey's hosting tip. We also have our preview for what's happening next week at our AIRLAP meeting, or for the first Friday of every month, and I think we're up to AIRLAP meeting. G'day, Jamie. Good to see you, mate. Hope you're well.
Hi, Jamie.
I think it's AIRLAP meeting number 8, I think. They're getting away from me rather quickly, but it's a great one next week. I'll be telling you all about that. I'll be telling you about the news this week on the Gold Coast. The Songjen organisation, the Arundel Hills Country Club, has gone into administration. Now, from Grant Thornton, the administrators, and the administrator's name is Graham Killer. So Songjen's organisation, I think you've got a hope in hell. Graham's coming after you to sort that one out. So that's some fun news that came out on the Gold Coast this week in the golfing circles, which is always fun. We have an explanation of what dependency is. We're looking at what happens when a person pleads guilty in court. After that point, what exactly happens? Do they just handcuff him and chuck him in the cells downstairs, stick him in a bus to the nearest correctional facility, or what happens in the immediate aftermath of pleading guilty? Also, we're going to look at some great job vacancies for government investigators who hold a certificate in government investigation. Government investigators who hold a diploma in government investigation can look at a $240,000 a year job today. You'll see that. And of course, we'll have other job vacancies for private investigators as well. Bad news this week down in Victoria, where there was a fatality with a man on an agricultural area emptying grain. He was crushed between a bag of grain and a truck. So very sad news. There's been quite a few fatalities down in Victoria this year, and that's another one that WorkSafe now are investigating. So that's a workers' compensation issue. There's very dangerous industry and transport industry, especially the grain, really is. There's a lot of fatalities in that. So that was sad news. Down in Tasmania, the Parks and Wildlife Service have had issues with people making a mess of a area in the Leven River, which is an absolute beautiful piece of Tasmania. It's pristine, but there are people dumping rubbish there. They're stealing firewood from the national park. And the regulatory enforcement officers who hold the certificate in government investigation for the Tasmanian Parks and Wildlife Service are having to go in there and enforce compliance, stop people littering, stop people wrecking the environment. And they do that under difficult circumstances, in difficult weather, in difficult conditions, up to their neck in leeches and tiger snakes. And life's pretty hard if you're a government regulatory compliance officer and you have to do that. But they do it. They go out every day. And, that's a win for the environment. But it's just sad to see that people are abusing the beauty of that area. So a couple of jobs before we start off with this week. See, Lewis Wanstall down in Victoria are looking for investigators in community services. They have full-time and casual positions available. This is an amazing opportunity to work for a top-class investigation agency who have contracts with the government to deliver those services. You will need to be a licensed investigator, and you will probably have to get over time the certificate for in government investigation as well. So keep that in mind. So that's one that we've been advertising for a couple of weeks now, but it's a great opportunity down there with Lewis Wanstall. Workplace Relations and Compliance Officer for Clubs Queensland. Now this is a beauty. So you are going to be investigating complex matters that happen in the various clubs in Queensland. And they might be the NRL clubs, they might be the, the return sold RSL clubs, they could be any kind of gaming facility, but they're a network of clubs and they need a person that can do complex investigations into serious matters. So this is a great job. You'll be the internal person in charge of that in Queensland. All these jobs, people, you can see on our Facebook page, which is the Australian Private Investigator, Corporate and Government Investigator jobs page. We put up 30% of the available jobs each week. So it's really worth a visit every now and again to see what people are being paid or what they've been offered to be paid. And all the jobs that I show you will appear there each week. Don't be afraid to go through there and look at some of those jobs and just apply randomly. The majority of investigation for Certificate 3 and investigative services jobs in Australia are not advertised. So if you see someone like Brookside, Surefact, MJM, CHS, M&A Investigations, Precise Investigations, and a whole lot of others, don't be afraid to contact them and say, hey, I'm a licensed private investigator. I live here and I live in these areas. Have you got any vacancies going? And they'll ask you for a resume. They'll ask you for a copy of your license. You never know what might happen. Mm-hmm. Now, I've seen people who are not very good investigators just persistently apply for work, just persistently apply from what's on that Facebook page. And they've got really comfortable positions and constant work. If you miss, I go too fast for you and you can't keep up with how I put those jobs up, you can watch the replay the next day on the Australian Security Academy's page on YouTube. Now, that page is almost 150,000 views. It's an extremely popular page to have a look at. So it's got all sorts of interest and the repeats of what you're watching right now. So you can replay it and see the job you saw and were interested in. And you can scroll right along to it. You don't have to listen to my hilariously funny jokes. So that's important. In the news this week, they finally tidied up the issue over the Danny Laidley police taking photos of Danny after she was arrested in St Kilda, where she was accused of stalking someone. So Danny had just transitioned from male to female. She was Dean Laidley, the coach of North Melbourne. So this was big news down in Victoria in the boys' clubs and all that sort of thing. And the police shared photos of Danny in their little network group and a Facebook group, which had a particular name. And basically that matter's been finalised this week. You can't share photos as an investigator of accident scenes, of people you meet. You might meet a celebrity. You may see a horrible accident, or you might see, while you're on surveillance, some drug addict or something like that doing something completely stupid. You as an investigator, you can't share that on the internet. It's unprofessional. Teachers can't share photos of their students on the internet. The police down in Victoria, in St Kilda, did the wrong thing. There's been disciplinary inquiry about it, and some of them have lost their job. So that's all been finalised this week. Converse to that, also in Victoria, this pervert, a depraved Melbourne businessman, has paid his teenage girl's sex victim $4,000 after saving her Instagram photos to gratify himself. Basically, he was wanking himself over the Instagram photos of this girl. The photos were taken from behind. they were cropped and zoomed into the girl's body, the court was told. So he was found guilty of that this week. It's in the news this week, and basically he's going to come back for sentencing. Now, lucky for him, he's working with a charity in Thailand at the moment.
Gosh.
God. Dear. Yeah. So that's all part of the news this week with Danny and that guy. Danny didn't do anything like that, but that's what's happened down there this week. Now, I've got that one. ProCare Group are looking for investigators Hobart, Wollongong, Illawarra and the south coast of New South Wales. So ProCare are advertising prolifically for that one at the moment, and they're also looking for an admin person for investigations in Sydney. Keep showing that one for some reason, I don't know why. MJM in New South Wales are looking for a full-time investigator in a salaried role in Perth and Sydney. So if you're an experienced investigator with a Certificate 3 in Investigative Services and a licence in New South Wales or Western Australia, you can apply for that job with MJM. So full-time role, you're paid a salary, you're not paid as a subcontractor. So great opportunity there. Here's a job I spoke about earlier, nearly $250,000 to be a criminal investigator. So this one's on our website. You can see it on our Facebook page. You can see it on Seek as well. They're after a very experienced ex-police officer, I'm sure, and they're paying $196,526 up to $238,000. Now, if you work that out per week, I think you'll find that's a pretty comfortable living that they're offering. So that one's on our Facebook page. Don't miss it. If you hold a diploma or an advanced diploma of government investigation, you're going to have a really good crack at that position vacant. So don't be afraid to get on our Facebook page and have a look at that. If you need to contact me about anything you see on here or you want to become a licensed private investigator, these are my contact details. Don't ring me now because I'm here live. Right? I can't answer the phone. It'll look quite silly, but they're my contact details if you want more information about becoming a licensed private investigator. Next week, people, we have I think it's our 8th or 9th AIRLAP meeting. AIRLAP is our Academy of Investigation Risk Loss Adjusting Professionals who meet every Friday for ongoing professional CPD, so continuous professional development. And next week, we're focusing fully on psychological injury investigations. You are going to go away with 4 templates for you to conduct psychological injury investigations. So next week, next Friday, 1 p.m, you'll receive an email about that if you are a member of AIRLAP. If you're not a member of AIRLAP, you're going to have to get in touch with Casey at this email and ask to join, right? You have to be an Australian Security Academy student or graduate, and you can join and become a member of AIRLAP. So next Friday, it's all about psychological injury investigations. There are more psychological injury investigations than there are any other type. So personal injury investigations with a broken arm and broken leg, that sort of thing at work, they're practically gone. So people get psychological injury investigations now, such as stress, that sort of thing, as a result of their job. So,
did you see the recent court ruling about the lawyer down? I think she was in Victoria, and she was a lawyer that did criminal and sex offences, I think it was. And she, I wish I saved it, but apparently it set some amazing precedents for psychological and workplace health and safety issues, saying that PTSD it does stem from your work, and she was awarded a certain amount. And it's the first really high, big case that's been recognised in regards to workers' compensation and PTSD. So I found that really fascinating.
Yeah, and look, that it's evolving. So they look at what affected that lady, what they can change or how they can address that. Was it bullying? Was it what she had to look at? Was it what she heard? Was it the culture of the place around her? We've talked about Danny Laidley and the images shared of Danny just because she transitioned to female from male and had a high profile in AFL in Victoria, which is a really big thing. So these things evolve, and WorkSafe actually adjust accordingly. They investigate, they look at what knowledge, skill, information training or attitude gap went wrong, and they address that with process, policy and procedure. It's not just always putting premiums up. So stress claims next week for AIRLAP, 1 o'clock, 4 templates on how to do stress claims. You can't buy that. You'll be able to use those with all the questions to ask the employer, the claimant, the witnesses, and more. So big day next week. You'll get an invitation about it as a member of AIRLAP. Now, just speaking about that, Mathew Seeto, last year in SpyCurious AIRLAP meeting on the 3rd of December, in December, which was our 3rd meeting that we ever had, Mathew forecast that there was going to be issues with long COVID and workers' compensation. We didn't know what they were going to be then because we were right in the middle of a pandemic, sort of getting towards the end. It was going to peak again in January, February, whatever. Mathew didn't have a crystal ball, but he had a pretty good idea that there were going to be more claims coming out of this. Now, there has been one, it's always tragic, these ones. It's a dependency investigation. Now, a dependency investigation means that a dependent of someone who is deceased is being left with nothing. They've died in a car accident or at work as a result of a work accident or as a result of their work. So down in Victoria, Chloe Sultana is suing Mr. Whiteboards over her father's COVID death. Now, this came out in the news a couple of weeks ago. So Chloe has been left without a dad who was the breadwinner for her and supported her. So she sued his workplace where her lawyers are saying he contracted COVID and as a result of it, he died. Now, dependency investigations, you always take 2 boxes of tissues with you when you go and interview anyone in relation to these because someone is recently dead. It's not like most cases in civil investigations where it's 8-9 months ago. It's going to be reasonably quick after they have to address this because that person's got no income. They can't afford anything. They may not have anywhere to live. So the dependency investigation, if they get up on it and they win that claim, then if they're very young, 3 years or 4 years old, it'll go into a trust which is managed on their behalf and it'll pay for their education and for their living expenses and whatever. So people are supported by that. It's in CTP liability investigations and it happens in workers' compensation investigations as well. So Mathew Seeto forecast this is going to be coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's not just in Victoria, it's going to be in New South Wales, it's going to be in Queensland, it's going to be other places as well. So these are investigations that are pandemic related that are over and above the stuff that we normally do in Certificate 3 and investigative services. You must be prepared as an investigator to do tough investigations. Now, people who are injured at work, it's highly emotional. Then people who are relatives of someone who had a fatal accident at work, it's doubly emotional. So, it's not all beer and skittles. You've got to be prepared to do this. You're not denying anyone's claim. You're making sure that Chloe, who is the dependent of the gentleman that died, her dad, is getting that compensation. That's what you're doing. If it gets complicated and he had relationships with other people and there was other children involved and stuff like that, that's going to form part of the investigation to see if that's there as well, because they don't know. You don't get an instant claim with everything in order. People don't know that they're going to die in 2 weeks' time, so they don't get their affairs into order. So that's where this sort of thing, people just, as a result of a tragic accident, there's no will, right? There's no money to look after those children. That compensation's there. And it's a dependency claim. So Dependency, fatal, the money's got to go to the right people. And boy, you have to ask some hard questions to ensure that of the surviving relatives. Because if someone's going to get a lot of money, both sets of grandparents are going to put their hand up. There's going to be a girlfriend somewhere along the way, ex-wife, they're all going to put their hand up. We want some of that money too. So the organisation, WorkSafe, have to ensure through the lawyer that instructs the investigator, the money goes to the right person. So it is really highly accurate questioning, and you must get those answers. Like I say, take 2 boxes of tissues along with you. Casey, what have you got for us today?
Well, I think that was a great reminder for people to get their wills in order. I have today, I've briefly touched on this before, but I thought I would go into more detail for people that do OSINT and desktop investigations. And even if you are in a private investigator role doing surveillance or government investigation and you have to do some research on someone, this is a great way to help find some extra pieces of information or pivot points on the person that you're looking for. And so today we're looking at username search. So there are 2 username search sites that are my favorites, that are my go-tos. And one is whatsmyname.app. So that is by OSINT Combine, which is the Australian OSINT group, which they're fantastic. They're always updating that. A lot of OSINT investigators around the world rely on this, and they know that, so they do work really hard on keeping that up to date. And the second one is instantusername.com, and that is more of a tool used by influencers. Say one day Mike Evans comes up with an idea for a show and he wants to call it SpyCurious. He would type in SpyCurious into the instantusername.com search, and it would show him whether it was taken by other companies or not, or another podcast, whether they've got that same handle on Facebook or YouTube or different things. But I'll show you some examples. So say the person of interest, you found their Facebook page. So I've just chosen someone very famous who has the same nickname across, the same username across all of his accounts, just for the ease and to show you how it works. It doesn't always work this well, but it's definitely worth a try. So we have Felix here, and he's very famous. His handle is PewDiePie. So that's his username, and he uses it everywhere. So even if he didn't have PewDiePie there as his name on his Facebook page, if you look up onto the Facebook website address there, you can see it's facebook.com/PewDiePie. And that is where people like to have their usernames. So for example, my favorite username for a long time was Case in Point. So I was facebook.com/Case in Point. And that was my username that I used across a lot of different accounts on my Instagram, my online poker that I used to play, all those different things. That was me. Chess, the different coding classes and schools that I used to sign up to, all that kind of thing. And that's the username that I ran with. And now I know better than to have just one single one. But people do it all the time, just for ease of people being able to find them. Personal branding, which is huge these days. So make sure when you go to someone's Facebook, you have a look at what the / is, because it's probably a username that they've created that they've reused somewhere else. Even they reuse it in their email. So we'll have a look at, so this is the What's My Name app. And this is the OSINT Combine tool. So as you can see, you put in search username. Now, just a word of warning, a lot of people don't do this. Always use your OPSEC, protect your identity, protect your computer. Your computer's important, so use a virtual machine. Have this in a sandbox, because sometimes it brings up links that you will click on. You don't want malware on your computer. You don't want viruses on your computer. Use your virtual machine. It's really simple to get one, to learn how to use it. It's not difficult, but protect yourself. So when you're using these apps, especially, make sure you're using a virtual machine. So as you can see, you type in the username there, and I typed in PewDiePie. Now, sometimes, depending on who the person is that I'm looking for, if you can see it says filter by category, I will go include porn, depends on what the job is, purely because a lot of people are doing the side hustle of OnlyFans these days, and side hustles are often important in cases where it's either workers' compensation or bullying and harassment, those types of things. You need that extra information, but obviously speak to whoever you're doing the job for. You don't need to include the pornographic information there, because as Mike says, like, sometimes you see things that you just don't want to see. So it's important to communicate with the person that you're doing the job for as to whether it's something you should be looking out for, or you just end up getting a feel. It's like, okay, well, it's a young girl. She's quite active on Instagram. She says she has an OnlyFans, and that's when you would kind of include it to see if it'll come up. So as you can see there, I've typed in PewDiePie, and it's come up all the green little boxes there. And then down the right-hand side, it has the links to all of the different accounts. Now, some of these are hits and some of them are misses, because PewDiePie doesn't have a million different accounts on a million different things, but some of them are really, really helpful. And you will find this with the usernames that you're looking up. So, for example, it found his YouTube channel. Great, that's fantastic. It also found an eBay account. Now, who is to know that this is him or not? Sometimes you get these complete misses that they just have a very similar username. I like these ones because, again, it's that side hustle thing. Sometimes you'll find people on there, they've got some, like a shop, they might be selling electronics, that they've taken the stolen from the company on eBay. There's a million different things that they could be doing. So eBay accounts are fantastic. Always check them. What else did he have? All Trails. So as you can see in the All Trails address there, it's .com/members/PewDiePie, but the name is Hope Pina from Amarillo, Texas. So it's unlikely that that is Felix himself. But All Trails is fantastic because it's open. It's a community where people are sharing information, sharing their hikes, sharing their trails. I have All Trails. I use it. I love it. And it's a really good resource for private investigators and government investigators and OSINT professionals, because it's saying where they're going to be, saying where they've been, and it gives a lot of information as to their physical fitness. So that's very handy. And the next one is instant username search. So that's the second site that I like to use, the one that more influencers use to see if a username is available. And I found this one incredibly helpful. I am missing a slide here, but that's okay. So I typed in PewDiePie and it brought up, oh, where did my slide go? That's all right. It brings it up. It found his Instagram. It found his Twitch. Again, these are all new things that the younger people coming through use as side hustles, and they make money off them. So if you've got a workers' compensation case and you've got a young person that might look like they might be into video games, or they might be cashing in on their gorgeous looks, these are side hustles that they can use. So Twitch is a video streaming service that people can make money off. And it's very, very popular. A lot of people do that. And these are things that you really should be having a look at. So, yeah, so as you can see, that's definitely PewDiePie. His Instagram was a great find. And I didn't add it in there. I might just add it in quickly so you can see what it looks like. It's really handy, and it brings it up in a really nice way. Sorry. Just trying to find it for you. Surely I got a screenshot of this. Thanks. Thanks, Mike. Here we go. I reckon it was Mike that deleted it anyway. I'm going to blame him, not my tiredness. Here we go. So typed in PewDiePie and it says that it's taken for Instagram, it's taken for TikTok, it's taken for Facebook. And this all gives you links specifically to those Facebooks and the TikToks, the Instagrams, all of those accounts. And they're just a fantastic way to easily collate and crawl the web for a different username. Often people just say their nickname. So they've got Bazza, which there's a million Bazzas in the world, but he might be called Old Bazza at work. And so they say Old Bazza, and then they tend to stick the year of their birth at the end of it. So Old Bazza 64. So those usernames are very unique to them. They're almost like a fingerprint, and they tend to reuse them. So it's a fantastic tool for finding people, finding those extra little bits and pivot points when it comes to your online investigations. That was a very long one.
Thank you, Casey. People, if you've enjoyed that, all you have to do to get Casey's OSINT tips is write to me with an email and I'll send you all of Casey's OSINT tips, including the 3 from the last 3 weeks that have been pretty good. So when you have those, the link goes directly to Casey. It doesn't go to the music at the beginning, the video at the end, and all my funny jokes. It goes directly to Casey and her tips, so you can watch those and it can help you with your OSINT work. So, great, Casey. You got a fan there, Casey? So well done. So, if you can't do it yourself, I can send that to you. So that's really important. Casey, you've got to run.
I do.
I've got to keep going. I've got to look at what happens when a person pleads guilty. There's some issues around what we talked about last week with the images taken by the private investigator in the workplace of students. So I'm going to cover all that. Thanks, Casey. We'll catch up with you next week. And we hope Bo gets very well soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me and have a wonderful weekend, everybody. See you next week.
Bye. So, what happens when a person pleads guilty in court? So you go to court and you watch it and the person goes, guilty. What happens next? You never see this on television or in the movies. It's just guilty, and then they show them going in handcuffs into a prison somewhere just to speed it along because it'd be quite boring. Once a person pleads guilty, basically the team comes in and says, okay, this is what happened that they're pleading guilty to. On this day, date, and time, this person did this, 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 and this. And the victim was this, this, and this, and what was the issue was this, this, and this. And it all goes down like that. And the magistrate listens to it and she goes, rightio, okay, I won't record a conviction on this one, but if you do it again, you come back in here, bring your toothbrush with you. You go inside or whatever. So they listen to the charges. Now, I was in court one day watching. I had a bit of time to fill in, so I had to wait for some x-rays or something. So I'm sitting in court watching, and I volunteer in an at-risk youth program on the Gold Coast. I'm a teacher of really little crook kids. If they come along to the class and learn how to read and write, we help them get work. And if they stay off drugs, we help them get work. And they're little rat bag kids. They've got to be kicked out of 3 schools. And it's a very, very successful program. And over the years, I've seen some pretty bad kids. I had one that would have weighed 35 kilograms come out of juvenile detention to attend. He was a glue sniffer. And next to him were 2 150 kilogram Maoris sitting with him between them. It was that bad. It was a pretty bad guy. I had one that was worse than him. He was stone cold motherless, the worst kid I ever saw. There was nothing likable about this kid. The others all had hope, right? And this last one, there was nothing likable about him. And I'm in court watching, and he comes out in handcuffs and goes and stands in the dock. And I thought, what's his name from 2 years ago? I thought, what's going on here? And anyway, they said, well, Your Honour, he pleads guilty. And the magistrate, she says, well, what's the charges? And they said, well, he was released from prison today, where he served 2 years for stolen motor vehicles, 13 of them. While he was in prison, we found his fingerprints on another 5 stolen motor vehicles. So he actually stole another 5, and he's here today to be sentenced for that. So when they do that and the person pleads guilty, the defence solicitor has to come in and say something nice about you. You know, that you worked for a charity, or you had a hard upbringing, it was tough, dad used to bash you, or, you know, you were very poor, or whatever. And this kid, they can't say anything nice about him because he's just not nice. He was no mastermind for stealing cars. He'd just carry a worn down key with him everywhere he went, open that up in an old Commodore and just go wherever he wanted to. So he was no criminal mastermind. So anyway, they found these extra 5 vehicles with his fingerprints on it. They charged him, brought him into court today. And the defence solicitor comes out and he cannot say anything nice about this guy. And the magistrate says, well, what are you going to say? And he goes, oh, well, Your Honour, my client can't remember stealing those 5 vehicles. He was only released from a correctional facility this morning, where he was arrested by detectives and brought here straight to court for these other charges. While he was serving his sentence, Your Honour, he caught meningococcal disease and he was in a coma for 3 months. And that's a good thing. And the whole court goes, what? There's all these people shaking their head and wondering what's going on. And because this guy said that's a good thing. It cured him of his heroin habit. And everyone, right, okay. So that was the nicest thing they could say about this guy. So that's what they do. And the hope in all that is, you know, they're going to say, oh, well, you know, he's never reoffended since, and he's learnt his lesson, and, you know, whatever, it all adds up. You might get a reduced sentence. So the magistrate took that on board. She said he'd served long enough, and, you know, basically not to do it again, and that was it. I never saw the kids since, but it was just amazing to watch that system work. But the point I'm getting at is, when you plead guilty, they start off with, on this day, date and time. Now, all the students of the Australian Security Academy have the time and event line drummed into their head. And that's how you put these things together. On this day, date and time, this is what happened in relation to that house burning down, that stolen motor vehicle, that burglary, whatever it is, you investigated as a licensed private investigator. So last week we spoke about a person sharing images on Facebook. Now, is there a defence to that? Can you defend that? Can you say, oh, you know, just made a mistake, you know, whatever. Let's have a look at an example that came out in the Gold Coast Bulletin this week. The guy on the right, criminal mastermind, worked at Movie World. His name's Miles Andrew Leister. He pleaded guilty to possessing child exploitation material and using a restricted computer without consent when he faced the Southport District Court in January 2020. He admitted emailing himself hundreds of sexually explicit pictures of children and women enjoying the rides at the Gold Coast theme park. So between 2018 and 2020, were you at the theme park? He's probably got some pictures of you. The photos, which included upskirting images of young girls and pictures of adult women with their breasts exposed, were taken from cameras usually used to capture happy snaps to sell to the park guests. So you're on a ride and you're about to go splashing through the water. You put your hands up and smile, and they snap a photo and sell it to you for $45. This guy kept them for his own gratification and pleasure. At Movie World, the bosses approached the police as soon as they found out about it. They didn't worry about their reputational risk. They realised they had a pervert using their camera system to email himself photos of little children, upskirted females, and half-naked women. So that's what happened in that case. So he got himself into pretty serious trouble, and he was reported in the Gold Coast Bulletin just this week with a bunch of other perverts. The one next to him here is a real estate agent who did a whole lot of things. Upskirting is probably the third biggest thing that you'll see in court if you go there and watch on the Gold Coast. They're just fixated. They've got to do it. I don't know why, but they've got to do it. So that's really weird. It used to be shoplifting and driving without a license, but they turned both those into just a fine, and they never turn up to court anymore. They just got the fine. Upskirting is still a serious matter, and they can actually clear the court if you were there watching that, because the accused will be in there and they'll be embarrassed having an audience. And when you have an accused, there's usually a lot of accused. So these people, you know, they get it in their head that they can do that, and they're going to get away with it. The danger of this sort of thing, if it's ignored, it can lead to workplace violence. Now, Movie World got straight onto it, involved the police and buggered the publicity, the negative publicity. They did the right thing. They didn't try and cover it up. So what happens if you're a local council and you've got a person in the local council sharing photos, or taking photos and sharing photos of people without their consent? Can it lead to workplace violence? Here we go. In a quiet rural residence, 3 council officers one summer day decided to do a big power trip over a shed on a rural property. The officers were the CEO, the town planner, and an enforcement officer. Basically, they said, bugger the powers of entry, we're going to go and hit this place in a raid because we don't like the fact they've got a shed there. So they put on their jackboots and went to the property. The resident was basically ambushed. It was a lady who was there by herself. The town planner demanded that he could take some photos of the shed. He was given permission. There was no reason to say no. I sort of look at the shed. The other 2 engaged the lady resident in a conversation. She was amicable. She wasn't going off a nut. She was wondering what was going on. It was just a shed that her husband had put there to keep his lawnmower and brush cutters and all that sort of clear, because it's a 4-acre property that needed a fair bit of maintenance. And as you can see, it's a shed that you can lift up with a forklift and cart it around. During the conversation, the lady turned around and the town planner was taking a photo of her from the rear, just like our pervert down in Melbourne who's helping a charity in Thailand we saw earlier. The shed was in the opposite direction. Immediately at that point, the lady told them to leave. 40 minutes later, her husband stormed the council chambers. This is the workplace violence that photo led to, from behind. Keep that in mind. The CEO was dropped with the first punch in his office. Luckily, nobody else that worked at the council was in the way when this person very angrily went in and went straight to his office. The town planner was in the same office. The other guy wasn't there. He'd gone home for lunch, luckily for him. The town planner was thrown around the room like a rag doll. At one stage, his limp body was thrown across 3 desks, clearing all the computers, all the paperwork, all the pens, everything on the desks. It was a really powerful throw around. These 2 were copping quite a severe hiding in the workplace. The husband was very angry that someone was taking photographs of his wife. The CEO said, I'm calling the cops, as he dialed dramatically. And the husband said, good, call them and let's show them what's on this camera. And he hit the CEO a couple of more times. Now, quite interestingly, the police station was directly across the road, about 20 seconds walk. He's ringing them and they're not answering. It's in the country. There was nothing they could do. The husband left with the camera, which was plugged into a computer when he arrived 40 minutes after the event. They couldn't charge him with assault because if they did, he's going to say, well, what did you expect me to do with them taking rear photos of my wife on my property when they didn't follow the powers of entry rules? What are these sickos doing sharing photos of her around? So they couldn't complain to the police about it. The town planner started karate lessons the next week. So for revenge, the council took the couple to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. All 3 council conspirators were there, plus 7 other people from the council. This had gone on for months now, and there were massive threats of repossessing, and there was no rates behind, there's no overdue rates. They're threatening to sell the property up because of this portable shed and whatever, and they're carrying on to try and get their revenge for the hiding they copped over taking a photo of his wife. You can't do that. It's going to lead to workplace violence. Representing the council was bow-tie-wearing barrister Stephen Chopping, who says he only lost 4 cases in his stellar career. He's retired now. He went first at the tribunal, and his address included charm, witty remarks, snide asides, personal attacks, and case law precedents, as Steve-O waxed lyrical for the tribunal in a great performance for his $5,000 a day representing the council. Once Steve-O had finished, it was the turn of the lady. She calmly and articulately said just 3 telling words that set the barrister on his proverbial legal backside. At that tribunal, there'd never been a loss of this scale. It was unprecedented in history. The council and their barrister got it completely wrong, very expensively, and that was exposed with just 3 words in 4 seconds after listening to Chopping for an hour. The tribunal heard those 3 words and dismissed the council's case as it had, by that stage, totally collapsed. So there we have an example of a council doing the wrong thing with images of a ratepayer being caught red-handed, spending a lot of money trying to cover their backside. So if you did that as a council worker, are there defences to it? Let's have a look.
Client pleaded guilty at the first opportunity, Your Honour. He is a man of family values, not like those queers down in St Kilda in Victoria. He is a former police officer, joined as a young man. It was all shoulder holsters, uniforms, shiny boots and saluting. Later on, he became a teacher in regulatory compliance. And in that environment, he reverted to his youth. And all I can say on his behalf is he developed a fancy for
So that's an example of a defence that had put up. It's a joke, okay, all right. You can't defend it. Here's another example of an organisation where images were shared. This one involves our monarch, Her Majesty the Queen. They started working together in February 1973. By 2005, 65% of the original team still worked at that workplace. It was a great place to work. Fantastic job, fantastic conditions, a really amazing place to work where they looked after their staff. It was so important, this business. It was opened by Her Majesty the Queen and Prince Philip. Doesn't get much better than that. This workplace had the best surveillance technology. They could look at people playing cards or playing games, basically gaming. Cameras were used in cases of disputes over who put what bets down, cheating, so people collecting the winnings when they didn't even bet in the crowd, monitoring for violence, drunkenness, potential armed robbery, card counters, dress code violations, illness, people who had themselves banned because they were problem gamblers. These cameras were the best that money could buy. They had a fully functional intranet at this workplace 25 years before the internet and social networking, and they knew how to use it. And they had to have it because of compliance with regulations of the government. Because if this place wasn't tight on that, the whole thing was going to get out of control. So these people in this workplace, they went to other workplaces and they trained them in other workplaces in use of these systems. So as other casinos came on board in Darwin and in Alice Springs and wherever else they had casinos in Sydney and whatever, these were the original people that taught the regulatory compliance for that sort of thing. They were a really tight crew, really knew their stuff, really good at it. They dealt with violence, they dealt with all sorts of trouble from all sorts of people. They looked after celebrities and made sure they were safe while they were providing the entertainment at the venue. This was a really crack team. Then one day, overnight, they all lost their job and were replaced by a whole new security team. There was no loyalty from their employer for 33 years of service for each one of them. It started innocently enough with some funny, quotation mark, shared images, but soon got out of control. Somewhere along the way, corporate policy, process and procedure relating to images got slack. The reputation risk to the organisation was too great to condone by ignoring the behaviour. Over 40 of them lost their job overnight, replaced the next day. Sharing images inappropriately. You can't do it. You cannot do it. You can't do it to Danny Lake. You can't do it to patrons of Movie World. You can't do it to ratepayers. You can't do it to students in your class. If you condone it, you allow it, and you let them do it, you shouldn't be involved in investigations if you're an organisation. So with that, people, that was episode 148 of SpyCurious, and we have come to the end of our program.
작전 종료. 전원 복귀할 것.
That is how every investigation agency in Australia, CHS, SureFact, MJM, all of them, precise in their week. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy, and I'll see you next secret week. Don't forget, people, we have got our AIRLAP meeting starting at 1 o'clock. You will get notice of that in the email, and it's all about psychological injury investigation with the templates of all the questions you've got to ask. We'll see you next week. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy. Thanks for watching.